Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 4 of Navigating by App in the Wild. And in this part, we're going to talk about pace, route planning, weather, and wrapping things up and just summarizing what we've seen in these 4 presentations about navigating by apps. In terms of our navigation roadmap, we're going to return to parts 3 and parts 4, that is knowing where you want to go and the path you want to take and assessing the difficulty of the route and the time it will take to get there. So let's talk about estimating the duration of a hike. There's so many variables in a hike that it's hard to come up with a perfect formula that will work on every hike for every hiker everywhere. In fact, it's impossible to do that. Nonetheless, in the White Mountains, we use a concept known as book time to estimate how long it will take. And here is the book. This is the literal Bible of hiking in the White Mountains, the most recent version by McGray and Steve Smith is out now. And book time is calculated in a very simple way. It assumes the hiker walks at 2 miles per hour, and then you add an additional 30 minutes for each 1,000 feet of elevation gain. So let's see how this works by going back to a classic hike in the Sandwich Range, which was published in the Chicarawa Lake Conservancy newsletter in 2021 or 2021. Of a hike taken 100 years earlier by Catherine Loring and R.W. Page across the Sandwich Range. Here's the Catherine Loring's record on the back page of the White Mountain Guide, appropriately enough. And you can see that they hiked from east to west, starting at the Piper Trail at 5:45 a.m. and finishing up at Ferncroft after summiting 4,000 footers and several other lesser peaks at 5:45 p.m. That is, they did this entire hike in 12 hours, start to finish. Here on my White Mountain Hiker app is the trail that they went or they took in bold yellow lines. And you can see they started on the right at the Piper Trailhead and ended up at the Ferncroft border, summiting Chicarawa, Paugus, Wanalancet Hedgehog, Mount Passaconaway, and Mount Whiteface before descending. This brings up an important point that you want to choose a hiking app that will allow you to make custom hikes, because although most of our daily hikes are not as extreme as this one, most of our hikes involve more than one trail, and we want to be able to construct our own custom hike out of a series of individual hiking trail segments. Here's a profile of their hike with 5x vertical exaggerated, plotted from east on the left to west on the right. And you can see that there's a whole lot of up and down on here as they went across the equivalent of about 10 different individual trails before descending in Ferncroft. So the White Mountain Hiker app can calculate times based on book time or whatever other times you put in. And so here is the custom timetable for their hike using the modern trails, at least, in my White Mountain Hiker app. And you can see, if you look at the entire hike at the bottom, that they covered 20 miles and 10,000 feet of vertical. Now, if they did it at book time, it should have taken them about 14 hours and 28 minutes. But it took Loring and Page only 12 hours to cover this. So we can actually use the pace calculator in the White Mountain Hiker to see how fast it actually took. We enter the time, 12 hours, the total distance, 19.6 miles, and the total elevation gain a little over 10,000 feet. And then the app gives you a table with a range of or a combination of horizontal paces and minutes per 1,000 feet that would cover this. Now, we do know some of their intermediate points because they were very meticulous, and we know that they had lunch on top of Passaconaway at 1:45 in the afternoon. And using that intermediate datum, we can actually narrow it down that their pace over that distance was 2 miles per hour horizontal, and just adding 13 minutes additional for each 1,000 feet of elevation gain. Quite a remarkable hike. Now let's briefly talk about the weather. If you hike at all in the White Mountains or anywhere else, you know that weather is a fundamental factor of not only your comfort level, but your safety level. And therefore, a hiking app which gives you the weather is a very, very useful thing. Now, the problem with weather forecasts is that the weather forecast in the valley is not what you want. It's the weather forecast on the peaks and ridges where you're actually going to be. Fortunately, the National Weather Service provides forecasts on a 2.5 by 2.5 kilometer grid, so we can look at the difference in weather between the valleys and the peaks and so on. And here is an example from my own White Mountain Hiker app in the weather display of the weather on around noon on a Saturday at the end of October in 2024 between Bretton Woods and Mount Washington. Now, horizontally, there's just 6 miles that separates these two sites. And yet you can see, if we zoom in on the graphical display where we're plotting degrees Fahrenheit or miles per hour or percent, all on the vertical scale, you can see there's quite a difference. The weather wasn't great down in the valley, temperature 44, winds gusting to 31 with sustained winds of 16, and a chance of rain of about 20%. But up on Mount Washington, it was quite a bit more challenging, which will come as no surprise to anybody who's hiked the presidentials. Winds were gusting 78 miles per hour. That's hurricane level gusts with sustained winds of 56 miles per hour, temperature below freezing, and a feels like temperature of just 9 degrees. And so on. So this is critical information that you need if you're going to be hiking in the Whites or anywhere else to keep yourself safe. So the all-weather apps or all hiking apps that have a weather component, including my own, only work when you have an internet connection. So you need to be sure that you check these while you're still online before you go out of cellular range. I'd like to say just a few words about commercial apps and privacy. For some of you, this will be a concern. For others of you, it won't be a concern. But you should know that many commercial apps sell your anonymized location data to location brokers, and they save that data on their servers anyway. The most egregious apps are ad-supported free versions of commercial apps. And when I say commercial apps, I don't just mean hiking apps, but I mean most weather apps capture and sell your location data to location brokers as well. One of the ways to get around this is to make sure you do not grant access to location in the background or quotes always to any app. You can see the screen in Gaia here where it's asking your permission in the Mac operating system or the iOS operating system. And you can see that one of the options is allow only while using the app. An exception to this rule is if you're actively collecting a GPS track. In that case, you will need to grant access to your location in the background so that the app can turn off its screen and still be collecting your location information while you collect the track. If you're doing that, you just need to be sure to turn off background access afterwards in settings. All right, let's sum up what we've seen in best practices for hiking with apps. Of course, you need to take an auxiliary battery and charging cable. The battery that I showed you in the first talk can recharge my phone about 3 times. You need to use a ruggedized case, and when you do, drops of the phone of 3 to 4 feet onto a granite ledge are unlikely to cause serious problems. You need to be sure to download maps for offline use ahead of time, or if you use My Apps, those maps are already included in the app itself, and so no downloads are necessary. Remember that your GPS position can be off by hundreds of feet if you do not have a full sky view. So do not depend on it, and choose a hiking app which will show you your positional uncertainty so you know where you stand relative to the accuracy of your position. Slope measurements can help you assess difficulty of the trails that you anticipate going on and can keep you from trails that you would feel unsafe on. You need to use an app that can make custom hikes because usually our hikes involve more than one trail. You also need to use an app that allows you to calculate time and allows you to set your pace for any particular hike. And an app that has weather data is very important for safety. And finally, although you may not use them because you want to have a backup for the critical function of navigation, you should always take a paper map and an analog compass along, just in case. Okay, that's it for my series on using apps for hiking. Thanks, and be safe out there.